Day 2, Radio Row, NFL Combine, Indianapolis. What's up? What's happening? Craig Hoffman with you on The Hoffman Show, where we're streaming live on the free Odyssey app and on YouTube as well. And Ben Standig is with us off the top of the show. How are you, sir?
Well, that bite you just dropped where I say
Yeah.
I feel like I'm 100 because you guys didn't know Dazed and Confused.
Yeah.
I feel that physically.
100, dazed, confused, or all of the above?
Well, yeah, I feel 100 and I'm dazed and confused. This is day 4 for me here. Obviously, it's covering football, so it's fun. This isn't real work, but it's a lot it's a lot.
Well, I feel
on.
like this is also this is I was like, oh, this is Ben Standig's place. This is where he thrives. But you've done such a good job over the years of getting into the information exchange business and breaking news and getting to know agents. And this is the place where you build that stuff. So I'd imagine this is a very busy week for you.
There is that. Obviously, we would all, whether Washington was picking 2nd or 12 or 26, we're all curious what's going to happen. But when it's 2 and it's quarterbacks, it is relentless. Plus, because everybody is off them. It's not just us locally. Everybody's talking about them. So the idea of trying to find information on that is, I think it adds a bit more.
So I want to circle back to the second. I will let the audience know we were originally scheduled to have Ian Rappaport from NFL Network on to join the show today. Right off the top, he got pulled into something. We're going to talk with Ian, I think, next week. So if you tuned in for that, that is not going to happen today. But we do have a bunch of great guests throughout the show, starting with Ben right now. And actually, I'm curious to ask you a question that I was going to ask Ian as someone who trades in this information space. And obviously, I'm not being all right, Ben, tell us all your sources and how it's all going. But regime to regime here, and you've covered multiple Washington regimes now, and now with Quinn and Peters in this era. One, when you talk to people around the league, how different are the conversations? And two, how different is it getting information out of this buttoned-up, seemingly professional operation versus the varying levels of professionalism we've seen in Washington over the last 3 decades?
Right. Well, I will say to this regime, I think the Ben Johnson situation is a good example of how they have been good about keeping information tight. I think one of the things that happened with that Ben Johnson situation was they weren't talking. And I remember, as the noise kept getting louder and louder, I'm like, I don't know where this is coming from. And I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but then I would pay attention to what other reporters, even national reporters, were saying. And they were like, nah, there's not much. But because there was this vague Ben Johnson rumor, it then intensified because it was the only thing out there. So my point is to say that they have done a pretty good job. I mean, I don't think there's there's no been real speculation about what they're going to do. If it is Drake May or Jaden Daniels, who would they pick? Do they want to trade up for one? So I think that's been a challenge. I mean, good for them if you're a fan of the team, you want them to just keep it.
We all want information, but we also don't want it because that means it's leaky and that everyone else knows too.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was your...
Well, just also, I experienced this for years, right? When I was on the beat, and I would come here, and you meet people,
Sure.
And especially at that point, I was younger in my career,
vibe, yeah.
right? And it's who are you? I'm Craig. I cover Washington. And they just give you that, how's that going? And you're like, it's as well as you think it is. What are those conversations like this year for you?
Well, to be honest, when you would have that conversation, it was I'm not a big fan of small talk. So this was a great icebreaker. You can immediately come in with any kind of joke you want. How's life going? Well, I cover the Washington Commanders, so how good do you think things are going?
Right.
But yeah, generally speaking, it has all been much more positive. That's why, again, just to go back to the Ben Johnson thing, people were viewing it as a negative that they didn't get the guy and how it all went. And I was like, I think this is again an example of things that were beyond their control or misperception. Obviously, and here's the other thing. People were like, they couldn't get Ben Johnson. They got Adam Peters. They got the guy who was the #1 GM draft pick to pick them. He didn't even take other interviews. That says a lot about this group. And the fact that Josh Harris is still an owner, obviously, in other leagues, but he's already been an owner before doing this. There is a track record there. This isn't, as we see with guys like David Tepper, like Dan Snyder, who hadn't done any of this before, and they come in like, oh my God, what a toy I have. How do we do this? And that's where you tend to see things go more haywire. So yeah, in general, I think they're pretty good. With free agency coming up, there won't be free agents going, I don't want to play in Washington because of it. They are crazy. It'll just be, I don't bet more money somewhere else or
More
better
money.
fit,
Yeah,
or
maybe they're a couple years away. I'm a little older. I want
Right.
to win now. Yeah.
right. The
usual
normal
football stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Ben Standig of The Athletic with us live here in Indianapolis on Radio Row at the NFL Combine. So I've taped a couple of our interviews already for today and some stuff that we'll play for the audience on Friday, Ben. And I think kind of one of the themes that's emerged for me today is I am less convinced that those top 100 picks, they're going to pick in those spots. I do feel like there's going to be some movement, and it seems like there are more people that are open to even trading either up or down from 2. Nevertheless, what you could do, maybe getting back into the first round with some of those other picks. Like, what have you heard? And then also kind of where do you personally sit on that? Because as we've talked about, I don't know Washington knows. So anything we're hearing is just kind of like the value of those things around the league, but you hear a lot of that stuff. So where comboing of your own personal opinion and the knowledge that you have, where do you sit on that?
So, for me personally, I like when you have a pick that you can trade down that makes sense for you, not just because it's any kind of a value pick, but just like the idea that it's in a certain range or whatever. So they have like 2 picks at the beginning of the second round. I like the idea of taking one of those picks, especially if these quarterbacks fall a little bit, the Michael Penix, the Bo Nix, and people are interested, because that's where you can get people to say, I'll give a little more perhaps, and then constantly having adding more to each year. So right now, like we talk about how many picks they have this year.
Right.
But now can you add more to next year's? And if you can continue to do that year over year, you're always going to be ahead of the curve. And then when there's those opportunities for you to take 3 picks and decide to move up,
right,
now you have that ammunition. So yeah, I would probably imagine they would pick some trades. Again, that's what's so fascinating though about this group. We don't know. Adam Peters, people can speculate all they want. He's not actually done. He's not been in the main seat before. Maybe
and when he was in the second seat, they did everything in San Francisco. They traded up, they traded back, they traded, picks for the future. They got picks now. Like, they did everything.
Right. They were aggressive in free agency. They found value plays, et cetera. So we don't know what he wants. And then same thing with Josh Harris. Like, does he put his thumb on the scale here at some point and say, hey, I kind of want do more to fans are not happy? Not that it's his fault, but they have had no winning record since 2016, no playoffs since 2005, or no playoff win since 2005. What can we do to get going more now? Who can say? But yeah, I mean, I would imagine Harris is an outside the box thinker. You mentioned Peters came from San Fran, who was not afraid to be aggressive. So it won't stun me at all if they are a team that's moving around. Whether that's up or back, we'll see. But I would be kind of surprised if they didn't do something like that.
How split has opinion been amongst the people that you've talked to out here about the quarterbacks? I'm going to go 1 through 4 now. I've heard enough people are at least willing to say that McCarthy is closer to Daniels than Daniels is to May. That I feel like I need to include him in this discussion and potentially even for Washington. Like, how varied have you gotten opinions on Caleb through J.J. McCarthy?
Yeah, it's about a week or so ago when I started hearing that J.J. McCarthy was closer to the top 3 than the perception was being discussed. I don't know if we're ready to say he's in the mix for 2. But in terms of just being somewhere in the top 10, I do, if you said to me, would you bet there will be 4 quarterbacks in the top 10 or not? I think I would kind of bet it. Because even if Giants at 6, Titans at 7, Falcons at 8 pass, you got the Jets at 10 just in case they want somebody younger for Rodgers. 11 Vikings, 12 Broncos, 13 Raiders.
By the way, just to put a pin in that, McCarthy, who I have no problem with him grounding before games and taking the shoes off and the barefoot stuff. But you get that with Rodgers. What a quarterback in New York. Ben, how do we make this happen? What manipulation do we need to do to get J.J. McCarthy and his zen, grounded, feet in the grass with Aaron Rodgers, his ayahuasca, and whatever else Aaron Rodgers does?
Right. I don't know if there's like a spiritual channel on the some streamer, but that would be a good that could be a good sponsor.
Amazing. God, I can't believe they wasted Hard Knocks on the Jets last year. Anyway, I was asking you a much more important question.
Yeah, no, it's important. So, yeah, I mean, so I could see 4 of them going in the top 10. But in terms of the May and Daniels thing, I do think it's interesting, right? So if you look at the public big boards, your Dane Brugler's, our guy, people like that, most of them seem to have Drake May ahead of Jaden Daniels. I saw Mel Kiper had a new mock draft where he had Daniels 2, May 3 in his mock. But okay, seems to be that way. But with like from a passion standpoint, I feel like I get more people passionate about saying Jaden Daniels now versus May. Now that may be because what you just watched was more impressive. His last season wins the Heisman, obviously, whereas Drake May was a little more. Well, it wasn't as smooth. He had some rough games here and there, and partly because he didn't have as much help at Carolina this past year, similar to the way Sam Howell didn't his last year. They had a lousy defense, things like that. So, I think there's a lot to like physically and athletically with Drake May. He's got the size, like 6'4". He looks like people have made the athletic comparisons to like a Justin Herbert. So I think there's a lot there, but he hasn't played a lot. Also, he started the last 2 years. He's played half the games that Jaden Daniels has in college, and maybe that's almost goes against Jaden Daniels.
I was going to say, I feel like that can cut both ways.
Right, because until this last year, he was. We wouldn't be talking about him other than maybe like a day 3, take a flyer. So I think that is just a really interesting battle, and I think a lot's going to. Obviously this is all projection, but it's going to come a lot to what your system is. What do you think makes the most sense? Even here, Drake May's at Carolina played essentially a system that was similar to what Cliff Kingsbury has done historically. On the other hand, Jaden Daniels' dual threat sort of ability, some people think is the better fit for what a Cliff Kingsbury team would be. Where does Cliff Kingsbury think about this? Well, that's obviously what we all want to know.
Or is he just like, I worked with the guy that I actually want last year. What do we have to do to trade up to 1? I'm gonna go knock on Adam's door every day until he does it. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think what Poles said about the fact that we're gonna have clarity on this before March 10th, I think is huge too. Like, I mean, if we know basically that Washington, and this hasn't happened in years, where you have remember they used to negotiate the quarterback contracts before it was all slotted?
Yeah.
Right? Like there were years that you would know the first 2 picks because those guys had basically signed contracts. Like they had agreed to terms before the draft. And, if there's no mystery about it, we could know by April and I'm sure that Peters will try to keep it close to the vest in case some team wants to throw some crazy offer out there. But we could kind of know that it's one guy or the other because Chicago is going to either trade Fields or not. Assuming they don't, we know they're going to draft Caleb. And then all of a sudden, the mystery kind of goes away because Washington is the de facto number 1 pick, minus the fact that the guy that would is already gone.
The Justin Fields thing is interesting. Like you would logically think they're going to move him. But if they don't, or if they're still debating, to what end? Like, are you going to take that all the way to the day of the draft? I guess you could, but then...
Right. Or do you just be like, hey, we're keeping Justin, number 1 pick is up for sale? Because that's the move if you're Chicago. Like, the thing that I've always said for Chicago is Caleb Williams has to go 1. It doesn't have to be to you, though. Like, if you can get down to 5 or 6 and still get Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, or Malik Neighbors and put that guy with Justin Fields and DJ Moore, that's pretty formidable.
Well, and this is the other thing, right? There's a world. This is the world I want to see. The Bears trade from 1 to 2. Not because I want Caleb Williams in Washington, but just from the Bears' perspective. They get all the stuff, whatever Washington would give them. Then they go to New England, picking 3rd, and said, hey, we got people, like if New England wants one or the other.
Right.
We got other people who are willing to move up. New England then does that. And then if they go crazy and say, we still have Justin Fields, we're kind of okay with that. Let's trade again. Like they could have an insane haul. It's a rare opportunity for a team to be able to control not just one draft, but multiple drafts to this degree.
Yeah, and by the way, they are also controlled last year's, which is why they're in the position to do it this year. I also have that draft just dream that Washington can do that to New England, and I pitched it to Field Yates, who obviously is very connected up in New England, and he demolished it. Just took a sledgehammer to my dreams, and I was like, cool, thanks Fields, thanks for that. So I'm not getting my hopes up, but I'm with you that I hope that Washington could do that same kind of thing and still get the guy that they ultimately want at 3 plus a little draft capital. Ben Stanek from The Athletic is with us here on The Hoffman Show. The other big story that I feel like has emerged this week that I think you would have really interesting insight into is the Howell trade proposal, which at first I just blew off as that's crazy. But the more I think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense that if you're going to draft a young quarterback that you'd want a more veteran QB in the room. Now, you also have, assistant quarterbacks coach and David Blau, who is in some ways is that. You kind of bring him in as a coach, but it's not the same when it's a coach versus a player. Do you think, what is Sam's value, do you think, around the league? And, as much as we want to say, he's better than Trey Lance, so we should get a higher draft pick in return, what's the scenario where someone would actually give up some major draft capital for Sam Howell?
Obviously the season imploded the way that it did, but when they were 4-5, or when he helped them beat New England, and obviously New England not good either, but whatever.
Right. The last time they won a football game, when we last met our heroes.
Right, exactly. But at that point, I was like, okay, we have seen enough where I could say you could go into next season with Sam Howell. Maybe he's the answer, maybe he's not, but you can go into the season thinking there's more here to get to.
Yep.
And then they lose 8 in a row, and all of a sudden they're picking 2. And because of that, I think we've just all sort of moved on. Okay, well, clearly all of these guys are going to be viewed better than him, and that's the case. That doesn't change, though, that Sam Howell still is intriguing. Now, we've all had the question of, well, what fell apart last year? Was it Sam Howell, the league figured him out? Was it Eric Bieniemy's offense? Was it because the defense was just such a mess? Everybody knew they were all going to get fired, whatever it was. I think there are teams who still think that Sam Howell is interesting, that they did see enough to say, okay, again, maybe he isn't the answer, but maybe at a minimum he's that higher-end backup. And, I'm making this up, but if you're a team like the Rams or the Jets, you've got older quarterbacks. You don't need him to play. You can do the development thing, but
also if your guy, which Stafford, Rams is the team I brought up earlier this week doing this hypothetical, because Stafford gets hurt every year. And if you're battling the Niners and the Seahawks, and we'll see what the Cardinals are this year, but you're battling those teams in the division, or you're battling for a wild card spot, going 2-1 in a 3-game stretch where Stafford is hurt versus 1-2 could be you in or out of the playoffs.
100%. That's the thing. Sam Howell showed last year he's not afraid. He showed a lot of toughness, right? Because all the sacks, he never missed any time because of injury. So I think he does have value. And this draft, you get past the top 5 guys. Maybe there's a 6 in sort of the middle rounds that, for Washington's perspective, we're just kind of not paying attention to. But same deal every year. You're taking a complete flyer on guys, and you're taking flyers on the guys even at number 1. But in terms of just being able to play in the league, the diminishing returns goes over time. Think about the Sam Howell's draft.
I don't want to, Ben. Well, it's terrible.
But that's what I'm saying. But Desmond Ridder is already basically kind of out. That's where it's him. Pittsburgh is Kenny Pickett, the guy that they didn't even put him back in the lineup last year with Mason Rudolph. Right. Matt Corral has already been cut. Obviously Brock Purdy.
Is he still in the league?
I don't know.
I don't don't either. Purdy worked out.
Yeah, Bailey Zappi is sort of in that Howlish range of he's shown some stuff, but who knows. But yeah, so you just the fact that he's not proven, but you can already say, okay, I think Sam Howell can play in this league, and that's not something you can say definitively about a lot of guys. So that's why I do think he has some value. And as much as I was saying last year, I wish they would have traded Jacoby Brissett at the deadline, not because I don't like Brissett, but because you knew he wouldn't be around. It's no lock he would be here, so just get value for you can. But the argument was, no, we want that veteran guy in the room. Okay, well, so if that is a value, Sam Howell's not going to be helping Jaden Daniels or Drake May.
Right, and I feel like it's extra awkward with May because
awkward.
They've shared a room before. They're friends, but I actually don't know that that's the best thing for either of them. Last thing for you, Ben Standing with us here on Radio Row. Of course, from The Athletic, doing great work all week. Very busy man, although today is not quite as busy for you, thank God. Today's your recovery day in the middle of the week before the workouts start.
There's no Peters, no Quinn talking today. There was literally a literal handful of coaches and GMs talking, so not much on that. The players, some of them went this morning, more tomorrow. But today is, all right, where are we at? Let's figure it out. Let's talk to people.
What day is it? Which way is up? Why did the temperature drop 30 degrees?
Oh, for real, though.
Yeah, I might have to get into the weather here in Indianapolis later on in the program. I was very upset when I looked at the forecast last night. But I want to wrap up. Free agency a couple weeks away now. Rumors start to fly. Things start to fly here. And, Quinn and especially Peters the other day were basically we're not going to spend big money. And I'm like, you got to spend big money. You have so much of it. What do we think that this free agent class ultimately, generally speaking, looks like for Washington?
So we know the needs, right? Put quarterback aside. Both lines, linebacker, tight end. Are you replacing Curtis Samuel, you're replacing Antonio Gibson, or you're replacing Cam Curl, Kendall Fuller. So they have a ton of needs. I mean, that goes without saying. I think the position I'm most intrigued by is the edge rusher, because as we know, they traded away Montez Sweat, Chase Young, and everybody else is a free agent. So other than KJ Henry and Andre Jones, they literally have nothing at that spot, and that's not nearly enough. This draft, though, is considered to be fairly weak at this spot. Once you get, like, for where they're picking in the second round, they may be having to take a big reach on anybody just to pick at 36 and 40. So that leads to the question of, well, do you address this in free agency? Now, the guy who's arguably the number one free agent is Brian Burns from Carolina. It seems like they may tag him.
Yeah. I mean, Dan Morgan, their GM, basically said as much the other day. He's like, if it comes to that, we'll do it. It's like, oh, cool, thanks. Thanks for letting us know he's not going to be on the market.
Right. So to that end, like, I don't know what they do at that spot, and that's why you wonder, like, a guy like a Bryce Huff with the Jets who had, like, a lot of sacks while playing in a backup role. It feels like if they're going to spend on one spot, that's the one I do kind of wonder about. Again, they need offensive line. We all get that, but the way the draft projects, they will have options in the second round, like guys who people are pretty excited about. Same thing with cornerback. If they wanted a receiver, which I wouldn't take one in the second round, but okay, that's up to the play.
There's a ton of them.
But the edge rusher though, and here's the thing, right? If you could figure out a real edge rusher to go with Allen and Payne, you say you would then bring back James Smith-Williams, who was the starter for the majority of that 2022 team that was a top 10 defense. All of a sudden, your line could look pretty good, and then of course the line makes everything else look better. So it is a position where, to me, it kind of makes sense to spend, in part because, again, the draft is maybe not where you're going to get a lot of help.
Yeah, there's a couple guys in the draft that are interesting, but the chances that they dropped, and some of those guys are having really good, like, whatever this season is, really good combine seasons. Like Darius Robinson out of Mizzou is like the guy that Logan is in love with, and he's like, every person that sits down in that chair that's a draft guy, I'm like, is Darius Robinson going to make it? They're like, no. I didn't even ask some of the guys today because I know at this point, like, prepare to be disappointed at 28 when he goes. But he's not making it until 36.
But you're right. Him, Chop Robinson from Penn State, those are like the two guys that I feel like are sort of if they go earlier, then Washington's going to have a much harder time to get help. If they stay there, then they could be the guy.
Right, for sure. All right, Ben Standig, anything in particular you're working on this week that you think people should know? There's a lot of, like, notebooks and kind of, if you want Ben's take on all the big Commander storylines, it's there on The Athletic.
Yeah, I mean, I'll quarterback. I mean, I wrote about what Peters had to say already, and certainly it's going to be a lot of the quarterback stuff, but I'll talk about all the various topics on the podcast, so we'll get it in there somewhere, but my editor would like to know what I'm writing next. I can't even tell him yet.
All right, well, I'll take that. Check the Standing Room Only podcast, and then eventually, if Ben and his editor come to an agreement, you can read his work in The Athletic. When we get back, Lance Zierlein, NFL Network. He's a big Jaden Daniels guy. Find out why next. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app here in Indianapolis on Radio Row, streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980, where you see Lance Zierlein, whose work, Lance, when I've been teasing you coming on this week, I've said you've read Lance's work whether you know it or not. Now, some people might read your mock drafts and stuff, but if you go to NFL.com and read like the player bios, that's you.
That's me, and some people will aggregate it. Some people will quote it in articles, and they'll say from NFL.com rates this guy. Well, I do. I don't necessarily speak for Daniel Jeremiah or anyone else, although if they were smart,
you clearly
they would
speak
just
for the
take
entire
mine.
league, the league office,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
You got the shield on the shirt.
Yeah.
No, it's always been great. I think you always do such a good job of kind of laying out the pros and the cons of different players, and that insight's always really helpful for those of us that are playing catch-up, who spend our most of our days covering the NFL during the year, and then it's
hard
like,
to transition from NFL to college.
Yeah.
Man. It's a quick turnaround.
It is, for sure. So the other thing that people might not know unless they've read your latest mock draft is that you, sir, are now all of a sudden an exception when it comes to the Washington Commanders in that second overall pick. Everyone has seemingly swung back to Drake May, but your latest mock that I saw had Jaden Daniels going to 2. Are you generally a Jaden guy over a Drake guy? Are you I think it's a better fit? Like, why
No, I'm
why
a Jaden
Daniels
guy
to
over
2?
a Drake guy.
Okay.
I just think the tape, I listened to the tape, and I don't think that Cliff Kingsbury would dislike either one of those quarterbacks, but I think the polish, we're talking about a 5-year starter in Jaden Daniels. He's just more polished. I think he's worked out some of the kinks over his 5 years. He is a legitimate dual-threat quarterback, and the rare dual-threat quarterback that is, about as talented throwing the ball as he is running the ball. Most of them skew towards the run over the pass. He's that guy that kind of balances it out. So, if he was 220-some-odd pounds, I think we'd be talking about Jaden Daniels potentially as the number 1 pick. But he's not. He's a thin guy, so you have to work through him being a runner and who leaves the pocket a little quickly sometimes and doesn't always slide. So you have to work through that. But I think Cliff Kingsbury will take a look at Jaden Daniels and what he does as a passer, and I think he'll come away with a favorable review. Drake May has a lot of talent and a lot of traits, but there's still work to do. Accurately better touch.
Yeah, it seems like his footwork gets a little sideways sometimes, too. He just loses it for stretches of games, where Daniels seems to be a little bit more on time. I've tended to be more of a Jaden guy throughout this process as well. And the one thing that I think also a lot of people poke holes in that I'm curious to get your take on is the lack of throws over the middle of the field. It's so important in the NFL. And I'm like, well, if I had the 2 dudes that Jaden's got on the outside, I'd be throwing it out there too. Do you see enough of that on tape, though? Do you see enough of the stuff over the middle of the field that it doesn't bother you?
You got to remember, I use a program where I tie I've got, the quadrants of the field. So I've got intermediate throws. So I will go, one of the first things I do will take all the intermediate throws. So I'll look at everything from 11 to 20. And I look at all 5 sections, outside the numbers, from the hash to
numbers
the numbers,
to hash,
and then
hash to
hash to
and
hash.
then other side.
So I look at all 5. So I'll look at all those throws. So whether he did it a lot or not, I'm going to go look at all the throws he did make. And those are some of the throws that bother me. He left a lot of throws behind wide receivers, throws that need to be completed. They're not the hardest throws. He struggled on some shorter throws with taking a little pepper off of his throws. And so for me, it's those are pro throws, in my opinion. Those are the anticipation throws you get. Those are the throws where you're getting crossers and dig routes where you have a little smaller window to work with. You got to be able to work between linebackers and safeties. And I think it's one of the reasons I gave Drake May a boomer bust grade is that, I don't see it enough right now, but it's not that he can't do it. If he does do it well, he's got a chance to really boom.
And what about,
he's got a lot of talent, but the floor is a little lower on him.
What about for Jaden in that intermediate area?
Jaden's it's not a problem for him. Now, he had some special wide receivers with Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors. He actually had 3 really good wide receivers. So he had a lot of talent to work with, more so than Drake May did, and that's a legitimate focus that some could make, is that, like Josh Allen, who anytime there's a big guy who has accuracy issues, just, Josh Allen, he'll be fine. Josh Allen.
Right.
Josh Allen's like one of one.
Right.
Him and Cam, I guess, are the only 2 that really fit that mold. But Jaden Daniels, I saw throw with good anticipation between, in the zones. I thought he did a nice job of getting through his progressions with with pretty good pace, which is something that I didn't always see from Drake May. And I think on tape he was clearly the much more polished quarterback. Now, if we're going to draft everyone based on who they are right now, Jaden Daniels goes ahead of Drake May. But I'll be the first to admit, it doesn't really work that way with a lot of teams. They want to know who you're going to be in 3 to 5 years, not who you are right now.
Right. Lance Zierlein is with us, of course, NFL Network analyst. You can read his work at NFL.com. Has some other cool stuff going that we'll tell you about here in just a second. When it comes
what
to –
do you like watching? You obviously watch these guys.
Yeah.
Let me turn the tables on you.
Okay.
When you're watching players for Washington, first thing I do for a mock draft is I got to go find team needs. And I typically look at fan sites and newspapers locally because they're going to have the better feel than me looking at a roster. I also look at, also teams. I look at future cap implications because that does play into some drafts.
Sure.
But when you look at Washington this year, I assume you're looking at quarterback. Who are your next 2 positions that you're looking at?
It's the trenches, and it's on the edges in the trenches. It's tackle, it's edge. And that's kind of a thing that I've started to think more about this draft. I wonder, do you try to go for one of each at 36 and 40? Do you think the gap is big enough? And I'll turn the question back around to you that I've answered it, yours. But is like a Tyler Guyton worth trading up for? And you go 2 for 1 there, where you package 36 and 40 to get back into the back end of the first round for a tackle, or something. Whether if you don't like Guyton, someone else in that range.
Mims.
Or do you go, hey, we're gonna take the best edge available at 36 and the best tackle available at 40, and we'll live with the results there.
So it's a precarious spot. It's great to have those picks because you could package them up and move up. There's no question a team would love to take those off your hand. It would probably be, it probably wouldn't just be 2 seconds to move into the first. It might, involve a team giving you back a 5th or something like that. But,
sure. Hey, we'll take more picks.
Well, so here's my thing. You got some really special pass rushers in this draft. There's 4 or 5 of them in the first round that I get excited about, and there's 6 offensive tackles I get excited about. So if you could somehow take those second-round picks, and you almost can't get out of the quarterback draft. You almost have to take that quarterback at 2. You're stuck. You could trade out, but you'd have to have some balls to do that and you'd have to really love, for example, maybe a J.J. McCarthy, and you say we're gonna gamble.
Or you just don't like any of them.
Yeah,
and you're like, hey, this is a wild card anyway. Whichever one I get.
Well, you can't just draft a quarterback because you need one, because as Brian Billick once told me, as soon as you draft a quarterback in the first round, it doesn't matter if it's 2 or 22, immediately the clock starts ticking on your job, whether you're a general manager or a head coach, because you got to develop that guy into the next guy. If you don't believe in a player, you get stuck with them. Look at the Pittsburgh Steelers are now stuck with Kenny Pickett, and he may turn into a good quarterback this year, but he's going to get a 3rd year. So you now are kind of stuck with a quarterback for at least 2, and in most cases 3, and in some cases 4 years. In Chicago, do we want to go through this and try to figure out, is this the year Justin finally does it? Every single step, you get closer to a 5th-year option, which is much more expensive, and then have to make a decision on a second contract. So if you don't love your quarterback that you're going to draft, now I think at 2 they will, but if you don't love your quarterback, you really shouldn't. You don't really love. You're passing up a guy much higher on your board for a guy at a position of need. That doesn't work out well usually, and it definitely doesn't work out at the quarterback where there's a historic, miss rate.
So if I'm telling you, okay, they're going to go the 2 swings in the second round.
Yeah.
Which of those? I think
I'd rather get into. So I'd rather get. The first thing I'd want to do is see if I could move 36 into the first, and take tackle or pass rush if one failed at Texas. With the Texans.
Okay.
I'd want to do that, and then I'd love to see it if I could. I don't know how many draft picks Washington has this year.
Many. And they got 5 in the top 100.
5 in the top 100. Listen, I'm playing games with my first 3 picks. I'm going to get 3 guys that are what I would do with my top 5, with my 5 picks in the first 100. I'm looking to get a pass rusher. That means 3 in the first round. You don't, from a standpoint, in 4 to 5 years, but I also am getting really good football players, and I'm getting big-time core players. You don't see teams make, 3 picks in the first round very often, but I would definitely consider moving 40 up into the first round for a tackle. Get it at the edge rush. So yeah, I'm using my draft capital, and I'm going to get the first 3 picks I want to be longtime starters for my team.
Yeah, and I tend to think that that's the way that Adam Peters wants to build it too.
Well, you look at the San Francisco model. I mean, you
Yeah.
always have to look at where they came from, and he covets rush, he covets D-line, playmakers. So I wouldn't rule out playmakers for this team because, one thing Cliff Kingsbury is going to want are guys, and there's certain guys that fit. You can look at you could look at wide receivers in the second round. I mean, you could go Ricky Pearsall from Florida. I mean, there's a lot of different Javon UCF, and then Jermaine Burton from Alabama. There's a lot of guys, Adonai Mitchell, that Cliff would probably love to have. You could say
Totally.
quarterback, wide receiver, and then best of tackle edge.
And with this class of wide receiver, if all the edge trench guys are gone, you feel there's wide receiver
Depth at
for
wide
sure.
receiver.
For sure. Lance Zierlein, of course, NFL Network analyst. And you can see Lance on Combine today, which streams on YouTube, and the NFL's fast hire to NFL Network's coverage each day. Lance, this was great. Hopefully we'll connect in the future. Appreciate you. And thanks for stopping by here on Radio Row.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Enjoy the draft.
Thank you. We continue from Indianapolis next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are live on Radio Row in Indianapolis, Indiana, home, of course, of the NFL Combine. Nikki Javala from the Washington Post is making her way over. She will be with us coming up at 5 o'clock. Nikki wrote a story with Mark Maskey this morning announcing the end of an era. FedEx Field is no more. FedEx pulling its name rights, or the naming rights to the stadium, and an opt-out clause that was triggered by the sale of the team, and they chose to exercise that clause. Nikki broke that story this morning. We'll get on the inside on that and a little bit more on what we're about to talk about right now, which is the NFLPA Player Survey. First and foremost, we've had guests these first bunch of segments. Anthony back in our DC studios is in fact back in our DC studios after some days off. And hi.
Hey, Craig. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm out here in Indianapolis, a place that you know very well.
I do indeed.
Yeah, and you were with Z the last couple of days. That's why he's not here. You're not here. That's why you weren't there. Is you were celebrating Zaire.
I was indeed celebrating Z4, and yeah, he's not in Indy because he's actually back training. Like, he got back to work yesterday, I think.
I'll ask you off air who he trains with. I'm curious because I know a bunch of the strength coaches and a bunch of them are out here. I'm also curious who he trained with pre-draft because in my head it might be one of the guys that I know real well. But we can talk about that off air. Anyway, and so it was funny because I was thinking about this yesterday, and I was like, wait. I remember last year when that NFLPA survey dropped. It was at the Combine, and sure enough, a day later, out it comes again. All of a sudden, everyone's tweeting about it all morning this morning. And I this year, like last year, it was easy to just kind of laugh at it and be like, yeah, this is a huge problem. And of course, it's a huge problem because, it's the ownership group and they're in the middle of selling the team. And like, this just proves why they need to do it. And can we get on with it? Like there's so much to fix. And this year, it's like the votes were taken in October. And so there has been renovations made to the stadium and the practice facility already since this happened. And they just announced a whole other round that's going to be done before the season starts. And so some of this stuff, even by the time the players get there in April, is going to be done. Ron Rivera is getting ranked on this. So it's like head coach C. That's not a Dan Quinn ranking. That's a Ron Rivera ranking. And so much of this is, I think, like my takeaway from this NFLPA survey, where if you haven't heard, you just tuned in because we mentioned it in trending, the Commanders ultimately, like on the composite ranking, come in 32nd of 32 teams. Like, it's just a reminder of how much work there is to do. It's not at all actually a reflection on the current organization.
My bad. I had to go get some headphones. Somebody moved my headphones.
Oh, did they? Were they sitting in the studio, in like the talk studio, the host studio?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw those in there on Monday, the one day that I've actually been in the office the last 3 weeks. And I was like, are those Ant's headphones? Because you haven't been there either.
Yeah, people keep on touching my headphones, man. I don't appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to have to – should we just forget the segment and launch an investigation?
No, we don't have to do that because I already think I know who it was, but, I don't want to air them out.
I do. Jeff? Jeff Walker. How many times we got to air you out on the radio? If you're going to take Ant's headphones, put them back.
Please.
It ain't that hard. Anyway, because the speakers work in the studio, you heard what I was saying. I think this is a reflection of how much work there is, not a reflection of the organization itself.
Yeah, the fact that, we got to put all this money into, what's already been there is problematic, but it also seems to suggest that the next stadium, I don't know if it's going to be in D.C., Maryland, Virginia, it's probably going to take some time because $75 million is a lot of money. So I don't think you're just going to be investing all that money for a short period of time.
Yeah, some of this money is for Ashburn, but even then, I still don't think that long-term, Ashburn is necessarily going to be their home. I know JP was talking about it this morning on his show because I was sitting here as he was doing it, and then we were talking about it in one of their commercial breaks as their table is right behind us here on Radio Row. But, that money or that land in Ashburn is worth so much money, right? It's a tech hub. It's right by the airport. There's a bunch of like really valuable wiring that runs underneath there, like fiber wiring in that area, that for a specifically tech company would be immensely valuable. Like we're talking maybe $1 billion parcel of land out there. And if you can go somewhere else, imagine what you can build for $1 billion or for $500 million as a practice facility. Like you can either pocket or otherwise invest an extra $500 million, build something that's way nicer than the dump that you're in right now. Because the honest to God truth is, and I don't say this to be mean, I say this to be factual. That building sucks. And there's just not a lot you can do with it. It's not a good piece of land. It's like on a hill, the whole deal. So why would you not go somewhere where you can build from scratch something else? And by the way, if you're going somewhere else, you can keep the current facility until you need it. Or while you're building, because the alternative is like you have to do it all in one off season. And so that's actually not ideal either. So I do think that ultimately moving out of Ashburn is the right play. And then with FedEx, we know that stadium is going to be something different here in the next couple of years. And the RFK thing is moving its way through Congress right now. And so we'll see. But I do think that the $75 million is a dedication by the current ownership group to say, we are prioritizing getting better as soon as possible, even if this is a short-term investment, because it's worth it for our players and it's worth it, in the case of FedEx, more so for our fans. And I think that says a lot about this group.
Yeah, I think they're all in on the fan experience, and they mentioned it in the article that fans will be able to recognize the differences as soon as they walk into the arena and even the parking lot. Like we'll be able to get in and out of the stadium, because
Hallelujah.
That's also a huge problem when it comes to going to and from FedEx.
I was talking to somebody about that at the Berhalter thing when I went and interviewed the U.S. soccer coach, and some Commanders folks were there because that game is at what is now formerly FedEx Field. And I was like, because I'm media, like my experience going in and out, the times I go to and from games, I just like hadn't experienced it like everyone else does for a long time. And then we went for the Beyonce concert, and I was like, this is terrible. And so the fact that they've already fixed that is are working on, I think they cut like 30 minutes out of that, if not more, last season as the season went, statistically speaking. And then obviously they're doing even more coming up this offseason. All right, Nikki Javala is here. We'll take a quick break, come back with her. Huge story today that she and Mark Maskey broke this morning about FedEx Field no longer being FedEx Field. How did that go down? Nikki has the answers next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Hour number 2 on Radio Row. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And you want to know what, Ant? This is our top story of the day. So let's run the Not My Beat playbook here, because Nikki Javala sat down next to me, and she wrote a pretty important story this morning.
Today's top story, from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in. Not My Beat.
So, Nikki, we were joking before we came back on air here. Last night, I was scurrying to go meet a friend of mine through the JW Marriott here at Indy, and I saw out of the corner of my eye you very clearly working on something in the corner. And I did not have the light bulb go off that thing that you would be working on would be very relevant to my day, which of course it is, until this morning when I saw the story you wrote with Mark Maskey that the Commanders are no longer going to be playing at FedEx Field, because FedEx is exercising basically an early termination option in their contract that was triggered available by the sale of the team. Mm-hmm. As best as you can tell us in terms of your reporting, how did all of this go down, and how surprising is this?
I think it's kind of surprising and not surprising, right? Surprising sort of by the timing. You know, there's 2 years left, $15 million, which is a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of, sort of the
it certainly would help to have $30 extra million when on the day you announced $75 million worth of renovations.
I would love an extra $15 million in my bank account. But, relative to, the total value of a lot of these naming rights deals and, the amount that can change in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge dent, but to lose your naming rights partner when you have 6, 7, 8, however many years left they have at the stadium in Landover, and also need a stadium rights partner at the new stadium, wherever they're going to be. They're in somewhat of an uncertain position, So I think the timing was surprising, especially because they had gone 25 years with FedEx. But given the history of, sort of Dan Snyder, his history with the minority owners, there was litigation, good number of,
so much
well
litigation.
documented, yes. And even though Dan Snyder is not the owner of the team, as you mentioned, the sale of the team triggered a provision that would allow FedEx to opt out early from the deal. And they chose that. I believe the deadline was the end of last year, and they took it pretty much up to the deadline. And I think it did catch some in the team by surprise. They thought, they were on pretty good standing. So, they decided to pull out, and now they have an old stadium with no naming rights partner, and
a new stadium
wherever it'll be.
Somewhere.
A lot of uncertainty there.
Yeah, we are waiting on news from the RFK bill, which is working its way through Congress right now. Your colleague Sam Fortier has been one of the people that's been all over that, so I'm sure WashingtonPost.com will have much coverage from Sam and Nikki's colleagues there as that gets finalized. So. I guess like the number one question I thought of after reading the piece this morning is like, could this actually wind up working out for them? Like, is there a way that, because as you mentioned, it's $15 million, which in modern naming rights deals, which are a bit all over the place, but still they could get more for that if the stadium wasn't in such a precarious space where they're moving out in a couple of years. But I don't know whether they negotiate some kind of deal where it includes naming rights for the new stadium or whatever.
Right.
Like, is it feasible for them to go like, you want to know what? Maybe they just did us a favor.
Yeah, theoretically. I mean, that's about 7.6 a year. It's 2 years, so $15 million total. And I think the average for naming rights nowadays, there's only two NFL stadiums that don't have a naming rights partner. It's Lambeau Field and Soldier Field. So it's the two oldest stadiums don't have naming rights partners. But the reason a lot of teams do it is, it's a lot of capital, and you need that to kind of reinvest into the stadium and maintain repairs and whatnot. So a lot of these deals, the average for the ones that have them, I think it's around like 12.5 to 13 a year, which is pretty much double what they, were getting from FedEx. So, if they can land another stadium rights partner and kind of get it in that ballpark, sure, it could be beneficial, because there was going to be a lapse no matter what. This deal expired in 2026. They are not going to be out of the current stadium by then to move into the next one. So there was going to be a lapse. By the way,
pause. What do we call it for right now?
I'm just calling it the stadium in Landover.
The stadium in Landover.
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing. I mean, like, I covered the Broncos for 6 years. their original, not their original, but the second naming rights sponsor, Sports Authority, a former, apparel company way back when.
Yeah, I think any kid who grew up playing sports has been to a Sports Authority and just gotten lost in there.
Yeah. They went bankrupt. So, and that stadium went without a naming rights partner for, I want to say, 2-3 years until they landed on Empower, a retirement company. So, it depends on the market. It depends on what they're looking for. I think ideally they would probably want to do what Tennessee is doing, and they managed to get Nissan on a 20-year sponsorship, and Nissan is carrying them through the rest of the life of the current stadium, and then will also be the naming rights partner of their new stadium that opens in 2027. So I would think that'd be sort of the ideal scenario. You get a long-term partner, you're getting a pretty sizable return each year, more than you are now. It's just and you got to think Nashville is a smaller market than DC, but you look at the state of FedEx Field, and new ownership, to its credit, has put in a good bit of money already to try to make some improvements, but it is what it is, right? So I think all that factors in, and we'll see if they're able to pull one off. If you don't get one that carries over, maybe you get a shorter term one. I think ideally you'd like to have one, or you find other ways to sort of make up that lost revenue that you would get from one if you can through. You see a lot of teams now like sponsor parking lots or different areas to get creative, but that revenue that helps a ton for teams, especially with the size of these stadiums and the amount, that just the capital repairs can be massive.
Right, and if they're trying to make a better fan experience, I wonder if parking comes down and you're shifting revenue and like how you make it. Can you make it more off corporate sponsors than off your fans directly? And if you're missing a $7.6 million chunk of change, like that makes that business model a little bit harder.
Yeah, and it's it is a lot of money for any normal person. It's in the grand scheme, it's not a ton, but yeah, it definitely helps to have a naming rights partner, no doubt.
Yeah, Nikki Javala of the Washington Post is with us. These $75 million upgrades to mostly FedEx, but I think that there's some that got earmarked for Ashburn as well.
For updated amenities at the facility.
What kind of difference does this realistically make for fans and maybe more importantly on the day that the NFLPA stuff comes out again for players?
Yeah, and this $75 million. This includes the $40 million that was also announced earlier.
So $35 million new.
New, and
we've now
all
reached
of this,
the end of my math skills.
Same, and all of these upgrades will be completed before the 2025 season. So they're putting all these upgrades in this offseason and next offseason, in between concerts and whatever else they have going on at the stadium and facility. So I think a lot of it will be noticeable. I think they've made changes to parking and trying to make it easier to get in and out of the stadium. They made some already with sort of the traffic flow things. They've made upgrades to premium seating areas. There's like a new field tunnel club. And I think it's maybe more subtle things that you can't see. Like there just needs to be some structural improvements to the stadium, which if you've been to any game, there are some improvements that can be made to stop a leak. Because a new one appears at every game, it seems.
Yep.
And then certainly at the facility, the NFLPA came out with their second annual player report cards where players vote on how facilities are, how working conditions are for teams. And, it's not really a surprise that the Commanders finished last for the second year in a row, and this is not a knock on ownership, but more a reflection of just the state of their facilities.
Yeah, the way I worded my take on that, because I guess that's the business I'm in. Reluctantly, I'm in the take business, Nikki. It happens to all of us.
Happens to the best of us. Yeah.
And also me. So my take on it is that it is a reflection of the amount of work to be done, not on the current ownership group. These votes were taken in October.
Yes. And how little work was done by the previous regime.
Yes. Yeah. And both on football and on ownership.
Yeah.
How if we're forecasting a year from now, how much can they jump in a year versus how much of this is like a 5 to 10 year project?
They hope to have all of these upgrades in this chunk done before the 2025 season. And they're going to be. It's a lot of money, but it requires a lot of money to just make even incremental improvements to the stadium. And you want to do enough to make it as decent as you can in that facility. For fan experience, you got to make changes for players too to make it better. I think they do take to heart these NFLPA surveys, and they have made changes since the last one to try to improve that. I mean, we saw a lot of it with training camp and like a separate area for families so they can kind of sort of congregate after practice in a more private area. So I think they'll continue to make smaller changes while, still keeping an eye on the long term and, where they want to be after this.
Nikki Javala, Washington Post, with us for another few minutes here on the Team 980. All right, General Combine. This is the question I'm asking every Washington person that sits in that chair, which is when you not even quarterback stuff or whatever you're hearing on the football side yet, just when you have conversations this year and you meet someone new and you're like, I cover Washington. I know what that was like under the previous regime, and everyone just kind of gives you that.
Stare.
Yeah, like, oh, you have a great life, don't you? How different are the conversations this year?
The first reaction from literally everybody I've talked to is, oh, I really like their hires. I think Dan Quinn will be good. Or if it's from, agents or other media that have dealt with him, oh, you're going to love DQ. Adam's really good. Like, I think he'll be really good for that team. So, yeah, it's a complete 180. It's still kind of built on hope and potential, and you hope this sticks, you hope it works, you hope they win. But it is definitely a lot more optimism than years past when, oh, sorry, you're covering your 5th federal investigation, that type of thing,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely different vibes. Outside of today where you're dealing with, like, naming rights and PA surveys, it has kind of almost felt sort of like a normal team. I'm so scared of jinxing anything. But, like, yeah, we've been covering football and coaching stuff, and who are they going to draft and quarterback and, like, wild. So, yeah, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. We'll see how it pans out. You always hope they win and they can
the week
stick
is
around.
young.
Yeah.
The regime is young.
Right. This is the happiest time of year in the NFL.
Yes. No,
happiest. Everybody's
is.
a Super Bowl contender right now. So
100%. One trend that I think is interesting this year, and as someone who covers not just Washington, a team that is kind of participating in this trend, but also someone who has great feel around the league. So many coaches are skipping out now, and it kind of started with Kyle and Sean a couple years ago. Washington has none of their assistants here, and DQ basically came to do media. I think he did tell the Junkies this morning that he's like going to sit on some meetings, but like he's out of here pretty quick. I think he's on a plane probably back right now.
Right.
So what do you make of that, and is that a missed opportunity where coaches like Andy Reid are like, no, of course I'm here. Like I have to talk to the players.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody kind of has their own approach, obviously. And, I mean, Washington still has a huge contingent here. But I think the value of the Combine, I don't know if it's definitely become more skewed to a TV production. It's spread out. Meetings are later at night just to accommodate TV and to get these workouts.
Well, now they
and
have
more
them in the
prime time.
mornings, which is a thing that never happened before.
Right. So, like, the quarterbacks are pushed back in the week to make sure people stay and to, more eyes. It is a business for the NFL, as everything eventually becomes one.
Sure.
So it's become less about, I need to see these players throw or work out, because a lot of these drills, as we all know, are not all that translatable to the football field. The interviews are very short. It's like speed dating in a lot of ways. You get 15 minutes. A lot of these kids don't even know what team they're talking to because they're on their 30th of the day or something. So it's so informal, and they do it by Zoom now, a carryover from the pandemic.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So they can do it in Zoom. They can do it in person. So,
Okay.
like, they have coaches at home that can be streamed in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So some coaches just see it as a benefit of, let's save the money on the trip. We get to talk to the players, and then we'll bring them in on our top 30s and get them more. I think the biggest benefit still to teams is the medical. And players, they go through the gauntlet with every bit of testing. And that's where the real value is, I think, to teams, because it's the workouts. Okay, fine, you can watch them on TV. More and more players are not really doing all
They're
of them.
on tape, which I always just get a great chuckle out of, because I just imagine, like, in the late March, some coach sitting in his office rewinding the 3-cone drill, and you're like, this is what we're doing to select football players? But, like, I guess.
I mean, a good 40 time can definitely put you on the map. I mean, Troy Apke, 5 years in the league off that 40 time that impressed Dion, so, like, doing something right. But, like, I think teams are kind of realizing this has become more of a production. They have new ways, more efficient ways of getting it done. You know, and I think they find it better to get these players in person, bring them in. And a lot of teams, they do it on top of that. And, you know, it's different for every team. I do think you're going to start seeing fewer teams send coaches, and I do wonder if fewer players are going to continue to participate unpaid, if that's going to become a thing.
I think it's interesting how it is almost, you know, people mess this up all the time. Oh, we went the full 360, full 180. It's like, no, this is actually going a full 360 because the combine started as a medical test.
Right.
As a way to not have players have to travel. And it's like,
right.
Okay, all the doctors, and then they're
One-stop shop.
Yeah, hey, they're here. Let's work them out.
Right.
Let's do this. And now it's like the medical side, there's still so much benefit for the teams. Although I do wonder if players are going to be like, no, you can't take me or leave me. Like, when do agents start pulling that card? But it really, like, because of the nature of the drills and technology, and also, you know, I think, you know, we talked about this on our podcast and stuff with Logan last year a little bit, like the GPS data available now. Yeah. I'd rather know what you run in a football game than what you run in a 40. And so the amount of data available is just completely changing the evaluation process, and everyone's just chasing the best way to do it. And as more technology emerges, like that becomes less and less clear of what that optimized thing is.
Right. There's more data, and this event has become more of a TV production, frankly. So, and will players continue to agree to do it? I mean, I know Marvin Harrison, the report that he's not going to do it. Not everybody can do what Marvin Harrison is doing. Right. He is a complete player, and he's solidified in where he's going to, you know, or is a team going to turn away Marvin Harrison Jr. because of that? No. But, you know, a player on the edge of going on a certain place might. So it still has value for some players.
And last but not least, because I feel rude not asking you at least one football question, because you do cover football on top of all the other things that you do. Do you have you this week developed any strong feelings in terms of where you think they should go at 2? I know they haven't decided yet, so to ask you what you're hearing about that is like, that's silly. They don't know yet. But for what you've heard from scouts, agents, execs, whatever, do you have any strong feelings?
No, my mind changes pretty much every day, sometimes twice in a day. Sometimes I'm like, you know, develop Jaden. I think he would be good. Some days I'm like, throw everything at the Bears and try to trade up. I don't think they would. I don't think the Bears would trade down. It's just my feeling. Some days I'm like, all right, trade back, get another pick. You know, let's kind of build up the rest. Other days I'm like, let's go get Kirk Cousins. Let's bring him back for a couple of years, you know? Like, let's go.
You missed Kirk. Some of us got to cover Kirk. You didn't get Kirk.
I know. I feel like I was ripped off of it.
You never know what you get on a Wednesday.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, this is the beauty of having a number 2 pick, gobs of cap space, a ton of picks. They could literally go any which way, which, you know, for talk radio, not great, because I don't have a definitive answer or opinion for you.
I will say, as the person hosting a show that has been do mostly draft content for 2 months, it is phenomenal.
Oh, awesome. Perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I honestly don't know. I don't know what I would want in that
I'm
situation.
with you. I change every single day.
Yeah, and I'm very glad I don't have to be the one picking.
Yeah. Although if we were picking, we'd have a lot more data. Because like part of the reason I don't feel like I know is like, I haven't sat down in a room with Jaden Daniels or Drake May or Caleb Williams. Like, I don't know how they process football information. I don't know how they process all kinds of stuff that just makes it impossible to, like, have a strong feeling. Does that stop many people from having strong feelings? No, my YouTube comments are a dumpster fire. But, like, it is impossible to look at it just with the tape. And also, I think the other part of this that I really struggle with is I don't know what they're building offensively. Like, Cliff going, like, hey, this isn't the air aid. Like, okay, well, then what is it? Because it seems like it could go any direction.
Right. And I think part of it, too, is, like, even when you do know all that, even when you do have every bit of data available to you, it's still a crapshoot in many ways.
Right.
I mean, Adam Peters would know as well as anybody with Trey Lance and, like, you know.
And Brock Purdy on the other side.
And Brock
of that
Purdy
coin.
on the other side, yeah. So there is a bit of luck to it. Even when you know all that you do, I mean, there's not a direct translation from the college game to the NFL game. Certainly parts of it, you know, but it is tough. A lot of it depends on, is that player going into the right circumstances with the right coach, the right scheme? It takes a perfect storm, and it's hard to hit on. I think this is Patrick Mahomes, every bit of good that he's done for the league, just otherworldly player. of course every team wants to find that next guy, but he doesn't exist. I think there will be a lot of great players that will be different, but I think the standard is so absurd. And not saying he will be the highest, that's not it at all. There will just be different super high players, but chasing that has made it even harder. I think it's definitely created more urgency, especially in the development of young players. If you're not good in year one, you're cast aside.
Right.
The lucky ones get a second chance, like Jared Goff. Coaches don't even get a full season to work with these guys, so everybody is chasing that.
Yeah, what you just said about Pat is the thing that I think I'm coming out of this week with, which is I don't know whether it's worth chasing him because he's one of one. And maybe Caleb's the next guy in that tree where, 5 years from now, Pat's still going to be 32. So, insanity
Crazy.
there. But, the idea that if you get the quarterback, you got it. If you get Mahomes,
right,
you got it.
Right.
But, would you rather then be the Lions or the 49ers with a very well-balanced roster, and the 49ers are Jake Moody missing or getting an extra point blocked away from maybe winning that game?
Right.
That whole game changes on that. So would you rather chase the 49ers model, or would you rather chase hitting one guy and having him erase all the rest of your problems?
Right.
And the Super Bowl rings would tell you should go, it's worth it to chase Pat,
Right.
but people are like, well, what if you land Josh Allen? And I'm like, well, he's not as good as Patrick Mahomes. And the question is, do you need to be as good as Patrick Mahomes? Because if that's the case, then good luck.
Yeah, if that's the case, then nobody else is going to be able to win. And I
Shut the league down for a
believe
decade.
that you don't need to be as good as Pat Mahomes to win. I
Right.
think there have been a number of really, really good teams with really good quarterbacks, just not to that level.
Right.
And the good teams figure out how to do that. I think that's Baltimore is a perfect example. I know they haven't won it all
Right.
with
But
Lamar,
but it's the same
way
model
they've
the Eagles used to
adapted
make the
that.
Super Bowl. It's the same model the
Yes.
Niners used to make the Super Bowl.
Yes.
All the teams that the Chiefs have beaten, and the occasional team
Yes.
like Cincinnati, who has beaten Kansas City, the only one to do
Yeah.
it really in the playoffs. At that point, Burrow was excellent, but he
Yes.
wasn't Pat.
Right.
But their roster was sick otherwise.
Yeah. Just the importance on one position is what makes this league so unique anymore.
Yeah.
Andy Reid wasn't regarded as Andy Reid like he is now. He's more like Kyle Shanahan is now.
Exactly, yeah.
Until he drafted Pat Mahomes. Now, Andy Reid is one of the greatest coaches of all time.
Correct.
But you need that guy. Not always to that level, but you need a guy. And it's, we see it in Washington, of course.
Yes, where they
So,
haven't had a guy.
How many
and
years?
It depends on who you consider the guy. Was it Doug?
Right.
You could make an argument that Rippon and Williams weren't the guy, and they won Super Bowls anyway.
Right, exactly. No,
which
it's
is crazy.
Yeah, it takes a perfect storm, you
yeah.
know, and I think the league is a copycat league, but often to its detriment.
And never forget that the Chicago Bears' all-time leading passer is Jay Cutler.
Yikes.
They've been around 100 years. Yeah. Could be worse. You could be the Bears. All right, that's Nikki Javala, WashingtonPost.com/sports to read her work. Or some of you are subscribers to the Post, and they throw the newspaper at your door. Nikki here with us on Radio Row in Indianapolis. Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, sits in that chair next. Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980. We are live always on the free Odyssey app and streaming on YouTube at the Team 980, where you see Trevor Sikkema. His very well done hair, very manicured beard, and a reminder that I like to do radio, and then I remember that I'm on video, Trevor. You do this to me every time we sit next to each other.
Sorry, you get more sleep than I do. I got to wake up, 2 hours early to do the hair. No, not quite that. But no, it's always good to be with you.
You got to have a system.
I do have a system. You're right. Yeah. And I actually didn't.
And that's what we love about you.
I actually didn't start blow drying my hair until like a year ago. Let me tell you.
It saves a lot of time.
Revolutionized.
Especially if you have like a good blow dryer.
I honestly didn't understand how people got their hair to stay in certain spots, and they're like, "Yeah, you got to blow dry it." I was like, "Oh." So
all right, that's our interview.
We've evolved.
Dude,
thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's got the most interesting mock draft of any of them out there, but we're going to talk about hair.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So especially for Washington, it's funny because I keep looking up, all right, let me double check, make sure this person hasn't put out a new mock draft, whatever. And every single guest I've had on so far has had Drake May mocked to 2. Now, Matt Miller from ESPN sat down yesterday and he's like, funny story, if I could do that mock again, I'd have Jaden Daniels. And then I looked up yours, sir, and you do it the right way. You've got trades in your mock draft, and not one, boys and girls. Trevor Sikkema's got 2 trades for the Commanders, down to wherever Denver is, and then back up down to 12, up to 10.
Yep.
Ultimately, they get a boatload of picks in J.J. McCarthy. Walk me through the your Adam Peters impression here.
Yeah, so, I think that, right, it is a new everything in Washington, and I think that with it is going to come a willingness to do whatever they think they need to do, the new ownership, obviously new coach, new regime, everything, to set themselves up for the future. Now, of course, I think that probably includes taking a quarterback. I think that they will look at trading up, and the only place to trade up is one spot. I think they will probably call Chicago and see what that price is, see if Chicago wants to move down, see if they have an opportunity to go get themselves Caleb Williams, who would be the hometown kid. Great story. I feel like I feel as though they are really going to try that, and they are really going to try to make that happen. We'll see if it does. I mean, the price has got to be worth it, obviously, and then Chicago has to, excuse me, Chicago would then have to feel good about Drake, May, assuming that Caleb's going to go number 1. So I think there's some variable things that you got to think about when it comes to what Washington would do to trade up and what Chicago would have to do to trade down. However, I also think that they're going to be in conversation to move back as far as outside the top 10. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to do that, but I am saying that this regime is going to explore every single option. And let's say Washington gets done with their quarterback evaluation and they go, it's basically Caleb or nobody. And they try to get up to number 1. Chicago goes, no, we're sticking with Caleb Williams at number 1. Well, if they're at number 2, just pick a quarterback for the sake of picking a quarterback. Maybe instead, they'd rather look at a situation where they go, okay, let's pick another team that is very high on Jaden Daniels, very high on Drake May, and say, let's go get 2 first-round picks for the next 2 years and absolutely 50 seasons. And they could be in a situation where that's what I did in that mock draft. I explored a reality where Washington would be open to moving all the way down to 12 with Denver, because I think Denver is going to be one of those teams that's going to be very aggressive to go move up to go get one of those quarterbacks. And Drake May could be that guy. I absolutely get 3 first-round picks for it, obviously 12 being one of them. And then I have them popping up and trading a little bit higher up for J.J. McCarthy, as J.J. McCarthy is still there. So that was kind of my thought process there. Is I think I get some feedback from people that said, hey, if Washington's going to be in on the quarterback class and you're going to have them taking a quarterback at 10, why would they move out at 2? Well, that is kind of my explanation to that. Is maybe Caleb Williams.
It's actually about the draft capital. It's not about the quarterback.
Correct. And so I wanted to start about how flexible I believe this new Commanders ownership regime, everything is going to be.
Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So I actually really like this, and I realize I feel like I'm in a safe space now to explore this thought process, because anytime you say any kind of basically I get the same feedback like 2. Why are you overthinking this?
And they might.
And you don't have the chance to be here very often. And I think I almost wonder if people are learning the wrong lessons from Mahomes, right? Which sounds crazy because everyone's like, yeah, the lesson from Mahomes is you need a baller at quarterback. And I'm like, no. If that Mahomes, you need Patrick Mahomes. But the level that you have to get to is he's one of one. So if you think Caleb, for instance, is capable of making that one of two, you do it. But I think the lesson is more of look at the other teams who get there. Look at the other have had success recently. They have more well-rounded rosters. Pat erases so much that no other quarterback can.
Right.
And so I would rather have the multiple picks over multiple years here to build up the roster. It's a theory. I don't know that I fully believe it, but I also don't think it's like unviable.
No, look, and I think people get the wrong view of mock drafts. Like, mock draft isn't necessarily so every mock draft is exactly the same. Now, we're kind of at the point of the year where we're predicting mocks instead of just kind of like saying, hey, this is what we would do, or here, or like, oh.
Right, you're starting to get information, you're talking to people.
That mock draft that I did a couple of weeks ago was one of the last mock drafts that I'll kind of do where it's like, hey, this is sort of what I'm hearing, but it's also a little bit of what would this look like if something like this happened. A lot of mock drafts that I'll do from this point on will be kind of predicting what might end up happening. And I think to the people out there that might be listening to this, yes, it's more likely that if they want a quarterback, they're probably just going to stick it to and take whoever is at number 2. But to your point, if they don't believe that any of these guys are necessarily a Mahomes, go build the roster the way that you need to, right? Especially with a lot of the turnover that they've had, the way that they handled the trade deadline to improve, I think, both trenches specifically.
Yes.
This is probably something that's going to take a little coaching staff in there as well. They're going to want to get their new guys in there. The best way to draft, set yourself up for a great situation over the next couple of years to have a lot of top 50 picks and create that team in the beginning stages of 2025, 2026, and only getting better and more open from that.
And to be clear, in the trades that Trevor pulled off, he was negotiating with himself. Great job by you,
thank
by the
you.
way.
I appreciate it. It was tough.
You modeled that trade down to after one that Adam Peters was involved in, the Trey Lance trade, and the Niners traded up with the Dolphins however many years ago that was to get to 3 and ultimately took Lance. Obviously, exciting way because they built out the roster, so who knows. The paths are not straight this time of year.
Yes.
Nor will they be for the next couple of years. Let's talk about the players themselves then that we're talking about here then. Where are you at with him? Where do you rank him, and like what's the gap, assuming that he's QB4? That's you mocked him 4th.
Right.
How big is the gap for you?
I have JJ McCarthy, and I'll be honest, I liked McCarthy a lot more than I thought I was going to. I watched him
to be the
him this past summer for summer scouting, and I was like, man, this guy is far from what you need him to be. In 2022, his first year as a starter, it was kind of the same story. Like, Michigan doesn't really demand a lot of him. They didn't do that this year. They didn't do that last year. But even last year, the pocket presence was not great. He was falling for all sorts of sim pressures, really didn't identify things post-snap. He was late to get to his reads. 22, I was like, man, this guy is pretty far away from being an NFL quarterback. This year, all of those things got better. Now, not to say that they were perfect, but when all of those things improved the way that we saw from him this year, plus a lot more confidence as well, that makes me think, all right, you're one of the younger prospects in this class. You have 2 years of starting experience for a heralded quarterback coach in Jim Harbaugh. You understand a baseline of run-in offense that looks like an NFL offense. We can build off of that, and that makes me think this is a guy that you take in the first round. When you take into account the arm talent that he has, it's not like a crazy elite arm, but it's a good arm. As long as he can get bigger and stronger, I think the arm can get a little bit faster, a little bit more powerful. He's got that added mobility to him. So I like J.J. McCarthy a decent amount. He is somebody that I would absolutely take. I would be comfortable with him at the back end of the first round, but we know that that's not how the NFL works.
Right.
You need a quarterback. You're probably going to take one. The teams need a quarterback. Guess where they pick? In the top 15. So I think he'll probably top 15 when it is all said and done. That investment, I really do. So look, if you got to plop him in there week 1 and start him in the NFL, yeah, he's probably going to struggle. He's just not used to being that commanding presence of an offense where Michigan didn't ask him to throw the ball a ton. They just asked him to be a really good game manager. And I know game manager, people hate that word. Like, people think that means you
Right.
can't play, but that's
they,
just
they
kind of.
won a title. He managed just fine.
And I think that his arm is more capable of being that potential takeover type of passer in certain situations when you need him to be. Maybe not week one of his rookie year,
Right.
but I think that he can get there. So, when it comes to the gap between him and May, when I went through film, it's very clear to me that Caleb is tier 1. He is the number 1 quarterback in this class. I also thought that it's very clear that Drake May is QB2.
Okay, we'll circle back to him in a second.
And then I have Jaden Daniels after him, and then J.J. McCarthy. And honestly, like, Jaden might be closer to McCarthy than I think that he is to May. But it doesn't seem like everybody in the NFL agrees with me there. So it seems like those opinions are kind of all over the place. But I don't believe it's this, if Washington does not get one of either Drake May or Drake May or Jaden Daniels, there's no chance that they're going to draft any other quarterback. I think there's not
the first person to sit in that chair and say that, which I feel like is that being that McCarthy is closer to Daniels than Daniels is to May. That buffered himself number 2. Like, he's behind Caleb, but he is definitively ahead of Jaden. And there was a lot of Jaden Daniels momentum building there for a couple weeks after the season. And it made sense. Like, he was the Heisman Trophy winner. He was awesome to close out the year. And, like, frankly, he plays on time a lot. Like, he's decisive with the football. The running stuff is insane.
You're talking May or you're talking Daniels?
Daniels.
Yeah.
Like, the deep ball stuff. He's the best deep ball thrower in the class. And that stuff
he has
is
some
always,
good guys to throw to.
Yeah.
He has some good guys to
certainly.
throw to.
But, like, there's times those dudes are running wide open and he hits them in stride.
Yeah.
And, like, that's all you can ask for on
won't
those
take
throws.
it away from him for sure.
So, like, there's that on tape, but then there's the stuff that Drake has on tape, which is equally as good, and there's some bad stuff with him, but there's some bad stuff with Daniels too. Why do you think, though, as people have dived deeper into this process, that gap seems to be widening on the kind of the consensus to being May versus, Daniels having momentum a couple of weeks ago?
I think first and foremost, May's got a better arm. Like, very clearly, I think he has a better arm. I think he's got better velocity on his throws. I think he can comfortably throw with distance better than Jaden can. Not that Jaden can't hit the deep ball. I think that Jaden's arm is plenty adequate for the NFL level. But I think May's is even like a step above that, especially when it comes to velocity. Like, velocity.
Is that fair? Is it too much?
I mean, it's
because Herbert will throw darts through people.
It's hard to say that right now because Herbert is viewed as a top 5 quarterback in the league. And so there are things that May has to improve upon. I think that he's way too inconsistent. But if you go back to what to comp what Drake May is right now versus what Justin Herbert was
and in terms of arm talent.
But I do think that May has a fantastic arm, specifically when it comes to a lot of the tight window throws from 10 to 19 yards, that intermediate part of the field, to the sideline. He's able to all the way very, very easily with a ton of pace to it. And also, there's no doubt about it, May middle of the field thrower of any quarterback in this class. He has the most big time throws of anybody, with the most dropbacks. He is just not afraid at all of throwing over the middle. And when you have a guy experience to do offense, because a lot of guys here in this league, like for example, Michael Penix is somebody who I really like. Michael Penix's arm. He does not have a lot of experience throwing over the middle. They just don't ask him to do it. Outside the numbers type of a thrower, sure, a lot of your throws are high difficulty and they're great throws. In the middle of the field, I mean, you are allowing them to just hone in on that side of I just think that May's ability and comfort level, confidence, middle of the field, does not get talked about enough. Even when it's between just him and Daniels, I think he does it in a better way.
Like someone else in the quarterback room with a Drake May. Let's say it's Washington. Like, how much would you signing a veteran because this can interesting. Like I do a combine style or whatever interview, and this is something that they're going to have to get out of it. But like in terms of the projection, the best you can. Is he ready to start week 1? And would you like be really, really looking for another veteran quarterback to put in the room with him?
I think he can start week 1, especially because he started for the last 2 years at UNC overall week 1. I mean, that's probably just the way that it is. I think that overall, knowing that the only reason why you're getting the starting nod to start the year is just because let's give May a little bit of time. That's not a great environment for Hal. Gets aggressive stuff, and that's not like nothing against him. Like that ultimately creates a really tough situation for him. So I think if your plan is to draft a quarterback at number 2, and if it's Drake May at number 2, in a perfect world, I don't know if the timelines would line up for this. You probably go get maybe some kind of a veteran, and then honestly, you probably try to trade Sam. Didn't have the number 2 overall pick. Let's say that they had a pick that was
played well enough that they were there. Yeah, I just don't think this is all on him by any stretch. They were just so bad down the stretch that they played them way out of Sam into the number 2 pick.
And I think that you can convince a team to give you a draft pick certainly higher than the one that it after the draft. You know, a team that needs a quarterback that didn't go to them for a 3rd, a 4th round pick, something like that from what he showed last year. And if you keep him and start him week 1 just to then give his job to May, I keep that trade value that high.
Right. And what happens if he's good? Like that and that's like play the draft.
I don't think they want that.
Yeah, no, it seems like a less suboptimal with us on the Hoffman Show. With a man of your deep draft knowledge, I'd be remiss if I did just talk quarterback in this number 2 pick. So the tackle class, what is the difference? Ish picks.
Yeah.
Right? I feel very confident in saying I would be surprised, and I guess I could just go there, but they are not going to pick at those 5 spots. They're going to package something and move somewhere, tackle, even defensive end wise, between the end of the first round and the beginning of the second. In other words, if they were to 23, 22. What kind of player are we talking about at 23, 22 at either tackle or edge versus?
For tackle, I think that it would be more of a drop-off than edge, because I think around the top 20, you're talking about guys like Tyler Guyton, Amarius Mims, J.C. Latham, maybe a Jordan Morgan type of a player. Like those guys, I think, are now in play if you trade up somewhere between 20 and 25 to get an offensive tackle that can really, really help you out. I think Tyler Guyton's a really great guy to invest in. I was a little skeptical after watching his film just because it's all over the place, but he's such a good athlete, and I watched him in Mobile. He is a competitor, man. I mean, like, this is a dude who wanted to go up against the best every single practice. He was so pumped up every time that he had a rep that was good, and he was also pumped up when he had a rep that was bad. Like, you could tell, like, he was motivated, like, he was pissed. He couldn't wait to get back out there for another one-on-one to kind of like prove himself and get a better rep out there. So highly competitive dude. Really liked the fact that a team could invest in him to be a starting offensive tackle. I think the same can be said for Amarius Mims and J.C. Latham that I mentioned there. The drop off to tackle, though, if you get into that second round, there's some offensive tackle But inside, like Troy Fantanow from Washington, Graham Barton from Duke, maybe Kieran Amagaji from Yale. Like, these are guys who played tackle who might be better on the interior. So to me, if you need an offensive tackle, if you're looking to package one up to get into that first round, that's a good spot to do that. Defensive end, I think there's a handful of edge rushers that you could really like at the beginning of the second round that I don't think that you would have to trade up into the first round to think, oh, wow, we're really missing out on this guy, because a Chop Robinson, an Adisa Isaac, both those guys from Penn State, Jonah Ellis from Utah, like just players like that, where I think those guys could be available at the top of the second round, where you'd be fully happy with that caliber edge players, and you don't have to trade up for those kinds of guys.
All right, last thing for Trevor Sikkema. I'm asking all the draft guys this question. Forget round, value, whatever. Just straight up, you're flipping through the tape, and you're like, I want to watch someone. The last 3 players have sucked. I want joy in my life. Who is your favorite player in this draft?
Oh, man, there's a lot of guys that I have really, really enjoyed watching in this draft. The cornerback group especially has been so much fun for me to watch, and I'll take the guy that I seem to be higher on than a lot of other people. I'll say Cooper DeJean, the cornerback from Iowa. His tape is just a joy, man. I mean, whether they line him up outside, whether they put him close to the slot, he'll come up and tackle a running back, he'll come up and tackle a tight end, he'll lock down an outside wide receiver. If they play him a little bit further in off coverage, almost like this way off, either cover 3 or quarters assignment, he'll perfectly time out the space that he has between the receiver. He'll bait the quarterback. He'll make a break on the ball. He'll get an interception. He's had a ton of interceptions over the last couple of years, and he turns into an incredible playmaker once he gets the ball in his hands. So
I see the smile on your face. Like, this is genuine right now. I mean, I love this
dude. I've comped his game to the way that Jalen Ramsey has been used in the NFL at times as like this ultimate chess piece. Of like playing the slot this week, that's what we're gonna do. Is it most advantageous to play outside? Okay, there you go. Is it most advantageous for you to play on the back end and take away a lot of their deep shot stuff? Okay, there we go. And so it's like that kind of a football player gets me really, really excited. So I think DeJean is awesome. Unfortunately, he's not working out because of a leg injury that he suffered in the season. I think he'd be great here in Indianapolis. So we'll have to wait to see his athletic numbers at his pro day. But he's somebody who, the cornerback class has been great overall, but he is somebody who I watched, and I gave him a top 10 grade. He's a top 10 player for me, and somebody that I absolutely love.
All right, that's Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus. Of course, read him on PFF's website. He's all over their podcasts. And every once in a while, I look up and I see that beard and well-manicured hair on NFL Network, too.
I appreciate
getting
dude,
TV stuff.
It's always a good time. I love chopping it up with those guys. They're fantastic. They obviously cover the league so well, so it's always great to link up with them.
Trevor Sikkema, everybody. More from Radio Row next here on The Hoffman Show.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's The Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.
Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And for the first time today, I've got the camera, Anthony, as we stream live on YouTube. Anthony is sadly not on YouTube with us today because the internet situation here in Indy is not supportive of that many video components. But I have the camera in the solo position. We actually don't have a guest for the first time basically all show, except for one other segment, which I didn't even bother to move. I didn't even bother to move the camera. It does feel lonely. It does feel a little lonely. I mean,
is that Scott Jackson in the background?
No, Scott Jackson's not in the background. That's JP Finley in the background.
Oh,
Mitch
I
Tischler.
did. He was next. Oh, it was Mitch. Okay.
And then Kerwin.
I know JP.
And Kerwin's back there as well. The cameraman from NBC4. Everyone's waving. Hi, everybody behind us. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at here. What's funny is it looks kind of busy because those three fine gentlemen are still here. And then literally every other table that I touch is empty. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 tables per row. In the 3 rows, like there's 1, 2, 3, and then there's kind of a break, and then there's another 1, 2, 3 rows. We are the only 2 tables where there are humans on them this time of day.
Wow.
I wish I had more camera control that I could pan around. But yeah, it empties out here. About 4 or 5 o'clock, about the time that we get going, everyone else is shutting it down.
Mm-hmm.
Busy in here during
Not
the
the
day.
life we deserve, man.
Yeah, not the life. I mean, hey, we'll take it. I can say whatever I want, and people are not going to turn their heads. My guy Robert Mays is over there doing the Athletic Football Podcast. So there is some stuff happening. Solak, who was on with us yesterday, looks like the Ringer boys are getting ready to pop something up. So there's stuff happening here. But there's only like 2 live radio shows, and it's us and my boy Q, who's going to join us later in the week from Las Vegas. So yeah, you want to pop on? Sure. I can put the camera back in a 2-person position. We've got JP Finley sitting down with us here.
They should just put you in charge of this. Like, if you can do all this yourself here, why? Like, that's an all-fair conversation.
Yeah, JP, I was like, please don't get us in trouble or create more work for me, because it seemed like we were heading down one of those 2 paths.
Who was sitting here previously? They were very short.
It was Nikki.
Okay.
She was the most recent live guest.
Okay.
Just now spoiled to the audience that Trevor Sikkema was earlier, but that's fine.
Sorry.
It's
I also
okay.
don't think he's short.
No, Trevor's not. Although it was kind of funny. He sat down and we were setting things up, and I was like, why do you look short on camera next to me? Like the angle was off or something.
The angle's off, if anybody's asking. I'll sit up straight.
Yeah, here, I'll sit back and do this.
Yeah, no, we're good.
It's like when, as you know from being a TV person that you are, you put the taller guy a couple feet back, and then you're kind of
You know the real trick that, like, and I don't mean this in jest, but a lot of times it can be both men or women.
Right.
But especially if you're covering like NBA and stuff, they just get everybody a box to stand on.
Oh yeah, of course.
The box is
My
key.
guy Adam Amin is vertically challenged, and Adam does the box thing when he works with Schlereth, because Mark is a mountain of a man. Yeah, because like
they give him that 1-2 shot like for 30 seconds in the second quarter.
Right, but like also I think it helps him see the field better.
Yeah, oh, that's true. I can see that.
But like Mark is a mountain of a man.
Big fella.
I had not met Mark in person until this year. I talked to him before, whatever. Actually, no, I went to visit Adam in the booth, and Mark was there, and I was just like, right, you were an NFL offensive lineman.
He's got 3 rings, dude.
Yeah. Like, and you know that, but
and the 19 knee surgeries.
He was also telling me one time we were taping a podcast. He's like, "Yeah, I was benching today, hitting like 450," and I'm like, "Oh,
it's crazy."
Yeah, no wonder you're still a mountain of a man. And Adam is not mountain of humanity. Love that guy, but not a large human being.
We got Ant. Is Ant here?
Ant's back in studio.
What's up,
Ant?
JP?
How you doing, dude?
I'm great, fantastic.
So here's what we're gonna do with this segment. Like, what's the most interesting thing? Because Ant's been listening to, obviously, the folks sitting in that chair live and taped with me today. And I was going to ask him what the most interesting thing he heard from any of the interviews that we did. But you've had your own set of interviews on your show and on your podcast. Like, what's the most interesting thing someone told you? I'll even go for you, especially this week.
One thing that isn't news, but in the world of, like, anything is news, I talked to Rick Spielman today.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to, like, kind of – it's fairly obvious, but like he's no longer working with the Commanders, right? Like it was a search team. They found their targets. Talking to him, though, about the NFLPA stuff as a dude that has run a building, you know what I mean? As guy's been a GM for close to 20 years. and just his belief that that the Harris Group will get that right. What else is he going to say? But, like, he also chose to work with those people. Like, I believe that.
Right.
And it's just funny how, dude, I remember being here last year when that report came out, and Ron
it felt
was
like a
furious.
bombshell went off.
Dude, I can't remember. It was either me and Nikki or me and Stanig, or maybe the three of us were walking down the hallway towards the J-Dub with Ron, and he was
That's how you know you're a
furious.
combine fan, by the way, is you're calling it the J-Dub.
Yeah.
You've been to too many of these things.
It's a fun week. But he was furious.
Yeah.
And he's like, we worked so hard on this stuff. And, at that point in time, they weren't even up.
They were up for sale.
For sale, right. I'm
Yeah.
trying to get my years right. But they were
the Harris Group hadn't bought, like, we didn't know it was going to be them.
totally right. And I think at that point in time, they were coming off a disappointing, I guess, 7 and 8 and 9.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, if we could just get the quarterback right, we're going to try with Howell. That was like Howell time. Like,
right.
Ron being fired at that point in time wasn't really on the radar, and because of that, it was like he was trying to build his program to where he wanted it, and that's why he was so mad. Just think about how different that is in a year.
Well, it's funny because, like, I guess it wasn't on the radar for him, but, like, I think all of us knew that when a new owner came in that it was pretty likely.
It felt
because,
a little
like,
lame ducky.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, and not to, like, go back and just start bashing Ron for the sake of it, but, like, to draw the contrast is, like, he was bad at that stuff. And I think people, like, he tried really hard and he cared about it. But there's a lot of things, like, I could try really hard to make the NBA, and I really like playing basketball.
Right.
There's no shot that I'm going to go to the Pacers game tonight, apparently. Gora's got some tickets for us, which is great. But I'm going to sit in the stands because I'm not good enough to play NBA basketball. And, like, Ron is obviously much closer to being an NFL head coach than I am an NBA basketball player. But
he was one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I don't think that's ever going to be something you say
Doc
about
Walker,
me. But
though, speaks highly of your hoops game. You should know that.
Yeah, we shouted when Ant absolutely destroyed Linnell. We had a long time to wait for Linnell, so we shot around a little bit.
I remember. I watched the whole video, and I have a very short attention span, and I watched the whole thing.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
But the point is, Ron, for as much as he cared about culture and gave it the lip service and maybe genuinely, like, gave it the effort, he wasn't very good at it. Both in the locker room, I heard you talking about this on your show earlier. Like, the locker room was a lot more sideways than I think people realize. Now, he was good at keeping that relatively in-house, but it definitely was not a good locker room by the end of the year. And I think, like, when you talk about building camaraderie in the building, like, he was better at, like, the staff feeling respected and that kind of stuff, which was a definite draw.
Less
different
frat
from,
house, right? Like,
for
that
sure,
thing was a frat
right.
house for a while,
right?
And then it was
And it wasn't. It was a professional,
operation.
But it wasn't like some thriving culture that was going to breed success either.
No. And I think, you got to fire your DC. There's problems with your OC. Like, it went sideways, clearly. But, yeah, as far as the most interesting, because there's almost this sole focus on who the quarterback's going to be at number 2, and everybody you talk to is going to have a different opinion about what the quarterback should be at number 2. Like, everything else just kind of seems secondary,
Right.
And today, this NFLPA thing, I even think, like, fans understand is, like, a different scenario.
Right.
Because of ownership change, and they just got here, and, it's been fun, and you get the contacts and a lot of nuance and information, but there's not like a real big buzz, I think, until maybe the QBs talk. Or
QB's
honestly,
talk, and then I think the other one is, like, when they go throw, if McCarthy starts ripping the ball over the field, like, that is something that I feel has started to pick up steam. And there's some guy I've had 2 different analysts independently say, on record, sitting in that chair you're in right now, I think that McCarthy is closer to Daniels than Daniels is to May. And then I've had other people be like, watch the tape, Daniels is better than May, and you're like,
yeah,
that's how subjective it is.
Totally, and I mean, that's the nature of it, right? And that's what makes it so compelling, and that's what makes it such a crapshoot, is that you really don't know. But it's going to be – I know this, and I think I just said this on the podcast, but flying out here Monday, I thought Daniels was the pick. And I'm not saying, like, what I would do, but just what I thought they were going to do. Now it's Wednesday night. I don't know. I don't know.
But the thing is, I don't think they know.
I agree. I think the interviews are going to matter. If you look at
Totally.
Whether or not Ben Johnson screwed them is debatable, but the interviews clearly mattered. Just because the contextual clues they were giving out during the coaching search process changed a lot after their first interview with Quinn, because the interview mattered. Because and honestly, if you think about Ron, who kind of had this like stoicism to him, a respected professional stoicism, right? Like you almost kind of need Quinn, who's just like this. He's like a shot of espresso. Like he's just like a ball of energy, and I think the building needed some energy. So like his personality was right at the right time for them, and I'm curious if one of these kids tonight or tomorrow when they talk to him could be the same.
Right. You're looking for that perfect pairing that you've got in other places. And, like, I really do. One of the things that, especially doing the pod with Logan, like,
Is he not out here?
He gets in tonight. So
okay.
he's out here. We'll be taping a couple of Take Command stuff, or a couple of Take Command segments and pods and stuff tomorrow before I head out. We only cross one day because I'm here for the media and he's here for the workts. And so
is he here to like coaching kids? Or?
No, he's here doing stuff with the Commanders.
Okay.
So he'll be doing analysis for their web, all their YouTube stuff. But one of the things that I think I've really come to appreciate more doing the pod with him and kind of sitting in the opinion seat that I sit in now versus the reporter seat that I sat in, where you kind of almost can't see the forest through the trees, is like how important that fit element is, not just schematically, but like personality-wise, the muse, if you will, right? Like Mahomes and Reed are a perfect fit for each other.
Right.
Neither of them is as good without the other, because there's a creativity to Pat that is totally unlocked by Reed, and the maybe flaws in the way that Andy thinks about football, being very pass happy, etc., are covered by the fact that there is nothing better you can do in the sport than to give the ball to Pat Mahomes and tell him to go. I think Brady and Belichick were perfect muses for each other.
For a while.
Well, and it took 20 years to deteriorate and, whatever. But, like, as Edelman put it, we worked for Bill, we played for Tom. That worked. And I think, like, even Goff and Campbell, like, they're great. That grit that they have.
Stafford
is, like,
and McVay might be, too. Like, that might have worked
100%.
out for all parties, right?
100%. And so, like, when you talk about that shot of energy and DQ, like, we all think of it, it's like, oh, it's Cliff at the quarterback. Like, Carroll and Wilson worked for a while because they had, like, this energy about them that just worked until, obviously, 10 years later, and it didn't.
Well, and, dude, if you think about the names you rattled off there, only McVay, Stafford, and Reed, Mahomes was play caller,
right?
Quarterback. Like, I mean, Bill was a defensive guy. Campbell doesn't call the plays. Pete certainly not.
Right.
Another defensive guy. So I think we got so warped into this. They got to find the play caller to be the head coach and like be the right offensive mind. And I think we worked ourselves into that too much. And the rest of the league does not. Like, when you talk to league people without microphones and lights, they're like, no, that's not.
Yeah.
That is not the end all.
Right. But I think that idea of a muse, like, who's the guy that DQ's like, that's my guy, because that's the guy I want here. And they'll make it work. If you have the play caller, it's a hell of a lot easier, because that is really important. Like, scheme matters in this league, but it doesn't matter as much as, like I guess scheme is fungible. Scheme can be worked to the strengths and weaknesses of a player. And by the way, if you don't do that, you're never succeeding.
Totally. And I think we saw that.
Yeah, and by the way, number 2 pick wise, D'Amico and Stroud, I think they get along quite well.
Seems like they do okay.
Last year, B. Mitch and Finley, are you doing the show from here tomorrow? One more?
I'm here tomorrow. Actually, B, if you're listening, I have to leave a little early. I didn't realize. I thought my flight was at 3:40 and my flight's at 2:40.
Oh, so you have B. Mitch and Finley tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Also, he and Mitch Tischler just recorded a Beltway football podcast, which I crashed a part of because there was a lot of gym talk, and I felt like my
you jumped right in there. It was great.
Was needed, so we hopped on that. So check that out. Real quick edition of Real Things next to wrap up the show, and then Maryland Hoops tonight here on the
Terps.
Team 980. Go Turtles. It's the Hoffman Show. We are live on Radio Row on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube. Radio Row is in the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana. Tomorrow's show, Doc Walker, I believe, is in, right? And Doc or Linnell tomorrow? Doc's in, right?
Doc. Yeah, Doc.
Yeah, the DOC in tomorrow. It is a short show. Maryland Lady Hoops against Wisconsin, I believe, tomorrow night here on the Team 980. That is a 5:45 start time on the pregame. So Doc in for you tomorrow as I'm flying back from Indy. But Friday will feel like we're in Indy still because we have a ton of stuff that we're taping tomorrow morning. We actually taped Andrew Siciliano earlier today. That didn't wind up making the show because we're short today as well. Maryland men's hoops tonight here on the Team 980 pregame starting in 7.5 minutes. So we got a great chat with Siciliano on Friday. We're scheduled to catch up with Tom Pelissero tomorrow. NFL Network is going to try to get us Charles Davis, who we were supposed to have today, and Charles' schedule got a little jacked up and unfortunately couldn't join us. But he is back on Radio Row tomorrow, so hopefully we'll get Charles. And Nate Tice from The Athletic is talking to me and Logan for Take Command. We might air that on Friday. So we have a ton of stuff still coming to you from Indy on Friday, plus whatever news breaks between now and then. But Doc with you tomorrow. Other than that, Ant, any other housekeeping we should do here?
I think that's everything.
Okay. You're excited for real things because you found some gems. So let's do real things. Real people sending to real microphones, shall we?
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, Anthony, as it goes when I'm in remote land, when I'm not in studio, you get to drive, sir. Where do you want to go?
All right, I think we can start off with Max Strus's game winner yesterday against the Mavericks. Here was the radio call from Cleveland.
All we need is the deflection. Pass deflected by Mobley, but grabbed by Doncic. Doncic bounced underneath the PJ, and he laid it in with 2.6
Hold on,
to
Ant,
go.
pause that there. That's so funny. All we need is a deflection. They get the deflection, then they give up the go-ahead basket. Dallas up. Cleveland needs a prayer.
Cavs out of timeout. Strus into Mobley. Back to Max. Half-court shot. Good! Good! He hit it! Cavs win! The Cavaliers had 2.6. They were out of timeouts. Strus let it fly. Strus hit nothing but net. Strus on the loose with the game winner.
That's a great radio call. That's like the right mix of energy, capturing what happened because it's the radio and it's not TV and you need to tell people what actually happened, and also hometown flavor. Bordering on homerism, maybe even crossing into homerism. That A+, good work.
Nah, he killed it. It gave me vibes of the Charlotte Hornets play-by-play announcer because that dude is so animated and he's so like descriptive in terms of like what's going on in the game. They gave me those vibes.
That was really, really good. Excellent work. Good pull. Good producing. 1 for 1, Anthony Haney. Number 2, I think you told me comes from the land of real things. Like a real person said that into a real microphone. Yep. That's ESPN's First Take.
But the Pelicans got a lot of players. I mean, they got 2 big offensive players. The kid Murphy can shoot. McCallum didn't even play. Mm-hmm. They can play some defense if they have to.
You like
the Travis Kelce lookalike and Vashalunas. Let's throw him in there, too.
Yep.
And I'll let Wendy take over.
He is a Travis Kelce lookalike. They're brothers. They
exactly like. And Alan Hahn said that. So I don't want to.
Well, I've been saying it for years.
No, it was Hahn who said so. I don't want to
get
steal
their parents together, and we got to investigate that tree. They look like
that's unbelievable.
But unbelievable how they look.
Oh, yes, the 7'1" Lithuanian guy is definitely secret brothers with the Kelces.
Vashalunas.
And they just blow past the fact that he doesn't know any of the names.
He couldn't say Caleb Williams' name early on the show either. I'm just like,
also,
God,
he called
dang.
it C.J. McCallum, like he's Irish. Oh, that C.J. McCallum, he's an excellent guard. Like, what are we doing?
I don't know what got into
Scottish.
Mad Dog.
Yeah, it's more Scottish than Irish. Anyway, the point is, his name's C.J. McCallum.
Yeah, I don't know,
man.
but it is crazy how it is actually scary how much Travis and Valanciunas look alike.
They do definitely. Like, I get it, but also, I mean, I don't know. Is Kelsey
One
Lithuanian?
Is 7 feet though.
Yeah. But that's honestly, Ant, one of my favorite wacky bits is NFL and NBA players standing next to each other. Because you think NFL dudes are huge, and then they look like peanuts standing next to NBA guys.
Small.
Because NBA guy, like 6'7", is like an average NBA guy, and that is the tallest dude in the NFL.
Yep, and he's a lineman.
Right. I will say one of the few human beings that is like NBA big that I've ever encountered in the NFL was Super Bowl week when Jonathan Ogden came on set. That man is, oh my God, he's large.
He's a giant.
He was big. But you see like big honking linebacker that you're like, that's a big dude. And then you see him next to a point guard and you're like, oh,
yeah,
the point guard's bigger. Maybe not quite as
thick.
It's
like Zaire. Zaire isn't that big.
Compared to an NBA dude.
Oh yeah, compared to
NBA guy. Me walking around, got a little bit, a couple extra inches on the biceps. All right, that's our show. We'll see you Friday. I will. Dock in tomorrow. We're live in Indy.